are live on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the big1050.com. And joining us as they do every single week to talk about all things Michigan football, our good friends from MGoBlog, not just Michigan football, Michigan basketball, Michigan, period. Our good friends from MGoBlog for the MGoBlog Roundtable, starting with the man that started it all over at MGoBlog, Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
I am well.
You are well. That is good to hear. Seth Fisher, are you well this morning? How are you?
Listen, Sam, I got some call outs to make here because right now we have Sklar's in the air on their way to Michigan. They're going to be in Royal Oak tonight, and we're going to be with them signing books after the show. So I'm really excited. Not only that, I get my new tooth today. So this gap tooth smile is going to be filled in finally, and I'm going to look like a human being, sort of. So, and I'm on a high right now, too. I went and spoke at Dooley's class again, which I do every semester, and I love it. And I was a little disappointed in Dooley, though, because he pipes in music before his class now. And I was like, no, you too. So that's how I'm doing.
It too, Dooley. Okay, so one Mr. Craig Ross, how are you?
I'm good. Shout out to Greg Dooley, a very fine human being. And also, you guys don't know this, but I got an email early this morning from Rich Reddy, and he said since the MGoBlog Roundtable is not charging any tariffs to Canadians who listen, that we have become honorary Canadian citizens. So I applaud Sam, Ira, Brian, and Seth as Canadians, since we're refusing to charge tariffs.
Does that mean we have to talk hockey? Because hockey is a
I'd
little
like to talk a little bit of hockey. We've neglected hockey this year, but in any event. So thank you, Rich Reddy, one of my heroes, and in any event.
So one of the things that has become very evident in sort of taking the temperature of Michigan fans this week is how little confidence they have in Michigan playing more than 2 games here moving forward. I think there was a poll. I didn't see this poll, but it was told to me. It was either Spath or Adelson who said, yeah, there was a poll put up on Twitter said, how many more games do you expect Michigan to play? And the overwhelming majority of Michigan fans said 2 games, Brian Cook. It's wow. They don't believe that Michigan is going to find some they're going to be energized by the second season. Brian, can you find some hope for Michigan fans for the second season?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not a terrible basketball team, despite the fact that, you might believe that given the past few games. I mean, the thing is that they've been shooting 27% from 3. That's not a number that is likely to recur. It kind of feels like that moment last year when Ohio State fired Chris Holtmann because they couldn't shoot threes, and they hired Jake Diebler. Nothing changed, and they shot threes a lot better. Now, I don't expect it to be great just because Gale is obviously more of an off-season project, it feels at this point. But, they still have some talent. They still have some ability, and they were within shouting distance of a very good Maryland team. They're going to play a team that's, decent but beatable. And I do feel like, when Michigan goes in the tournament, pretty much everybody is going to be picking them for an early exit, and that's fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen. They'll still be favored in their first round NCAA game by Vegas, and they should still win that, even if they're going to be in one of those 5-12 or 4-13 matchups that everybody is like, oh, this one. And it's fine. This is year one. Obviously, some things didn't go to plan. There were a couple players who came in and just didn't really live up to the billing that you would expect given their previous college performance. And future is bright. You have Trey McKinney coming in next year. You have sophomore versions of Pippen and Kaysen. This is a moment to take a breath and think that Dusty May did a pretty good job assembling this roster from Will Cheddar and Damari Burnett into an obvious lock tourney team. And we'll see what happens, a chip in a chair, and we'll go forward from here.
Yeah,
go ahead. Go
sorry,
ahead.
I'd like to add to that. Torvik lets you split season up by dates. And so if you look at where Michigan is from the Minnesota game on, so we're talking like mid-January on, Michigan's been a bottom half of the Big Ten team. They've been like a Minnesota level or Oregon level team, the way they played overall. And it's hard to look at this team and expect them to play any differently than that. But an average Big Ten team, and I know Minnesota just fired Ben Johnson this morning, but like that level of team is playing at like a 10 seed level. And you got to remember, like that first round team that you're going to face, that 12 seed or 13 seed, that's the team that's playing below the level that Michigan's played. And this team wins. So even when they play these like games where like they go to Ohio State, which is, you know, an off the bubble team, right? When they play that team, they still win. And we've been talking about this in our Slack chat a whole bunch, but you know, the overall package is not going to be, they're not going to go very far in the tournament. Okay. But if that first round game, that's easy money. Take Michigan because somebody's going to have to go up against Vlad Golden and they're not going to have the size for that. And that's the kind of team that you're going to be facing, a team more like on a Minnesota Oregon level, not a team, you know, that like a Michigan State level. And then you look at our schedule, right? We faced Illinois, Michigan State. Like these are good teams. Maryland. These are good teams. And they were able to exploit the fundamental problems that this Michigan team has, which aren't going away. Brian already talked about them. They can't do any more adjustment because you're running up against your skill level. But that skill level is still very high. Vlad Golden is just an automatic 30 points, either, you know, because of the way they have to react to him and the points he's going to get, especially against the kind of centers that you're going to see when you know, early in the tournament.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what anything you guys have said. I think Michigan is still alive. Am I optimistic that they'll beat Purdue, who they'll probably play? No, I'm not. But they could. They have the ability. They just have to make some baskets, and the team has the ability to make baskets. They just haven't in the last 4 or 5, 6 games. And you know, in the tournament, I think, yeah, they'll probably get a team they can beat in round 1 at least, and then we'll see. I think Brian's big picture point is right on the money. You have to look at the whole body of work over the course of the year. Preseason, we talked about, well, where do you think Michigan's going to finish in the Big Ten? And the national Midwest consciousness was 9, 10, 11. And we all said, that seems a little conservative. We all thought 6 is my recall. They'll be in 6, 4, 5, 6, 7 in that range. Probably not 1, 2, 3. I think we all had Michigan State and Purdue at the top, and so they've well overachieved in relation to consciousness. And so I think it's a mistake to just look at the last few games, as Seth points out, against really good teams. Michigan State's a really good team. You know, and Maryland's a good team, and just point to those where I think there remains some upside with this team. There are some frustrations, and there have been some regressions, and part of it has been some injuries too that have hurt. But
yeah,
you know, I don't know. We'll see. I think in the big picture things are looking up for Michigan basketball. I mean, you've got the McKinney kid coming in who can really play. Winters Grady, people will like him. He's sort of Nick Stauskas, not quite as athletic, but more physical. And so I like Winters Grady. And then I don't know, they have the mayor of Las Vegas, Oscar Goodman, coming in. I haven't seen him play. I don't know if you guys have. I know that he had an outstanding career in international junior basketball, and he's a big, rugged guy. But they've got to bring a center in, obviously, and probably 2, to be honest, because I think it's more likely than not that Danny Wolf will be in the NBA next year.
Sure. I want to finish a thought there. I was saying that strategically they're kind of stuck. Tactically, they're very good. And this is one of the things that we've been undervaluing because, when Michigan wins a game by 2 points, we're like, oh, that was luck. But another one of those Torvik slices that you can do. Michigan outscores their opponents by a factor of 3 in the last 2 minutes of games. Especially when you take out garbage time, that is that's tactics, right? Dusty May always has something in the bag at the very end of games, and you don't have to win by 8, right? You don't have to be winning these games by 12 points the whole time and then finish. All you got to do is have more points than the other team at the end. And basketball games seesaw, right? It's where you are at the very end of the game. And one thing that I think Dusty May has done well, and I think we've seen that, and I think it's more than luck, is have a good strategy at the end of these games. And even when they lost some close games earlier in the season, you look back at those games and you're like, they had some good ideas. They just, they can get the shot to fall, or their opponent just kind of, made a really good, nice runner or something like that to beat them. It's Michigan plays very well at the very end of games. And that's a very strong thing to have when you're playing a lot of teams that are fairly similar, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I guess if you're going to take a positive way, it feels like Danny is feeling a little better with his offense, his free throw shooting notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But he's started to find a little more balance of late. Don't know what it is. Probably some of the length around the rim that he's faced that has affected a little bit of his efficiency around the rim. But by and large, he's at least started to put back up some of the point totals that we saw, which gives me some reason for confidence that they'll be able to count on him as they get into tournament play. But they gotta get their backcourt on track, and that has been largely absent, and especially Trey. And how do you do that? That's the $1 million question. I say that literally. This is what Dusty May, one of the things he's paid to do. You got some extra time, but to me, I start to experiment. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of guys who you can run off screens and do this and that, but he's one of those guys that I might consider trying to get some looks and get shots, because you can't really do that with Amari. He's not a guy. I was talking to Daniel Horton about this. He's not a guy that you run off a bunch of staggers and.
No, because he sets up too wide and he's too deliberate. He's a great shooter, but he's a guy that you need to work to get him his shot. And because if he's stable and he's going to make shots, he's a great 3, but he's not going to get him off the dribble or off the move.
Right.
That's just not what he can do.
Right.
I mean, what I said last week, and I'm sticking with it, even though I've never seen a team do it. I want to put 2 guys in the corner. I don't care who it is. I want Namari to be one of them. And then I want to play a Macker game in the middle of the court with 2 7-footers. And I have never seen a team do that, but how many teams have 7-footers who you can play together? And it feels plausible to me. But the problem is, I think, is that Trey, the Michigan problem is, big picture over the course of the season, is Trey is not really a creator or facilitator, or he hasn't been. Maybe he can be, but he hasn't been. And that leaves the ball in Danny Wolf's hands too much, which ends up having him to do too much, which then ends up with too many turnovers. That's my view.
It is somewhat of a conundrum, but you do have some setup ability with Danny that they try to lean into. And listen, you aren't going to be running Reuben Jones off a bunch of screens either. You try to make him be somewhat of a setup guy. And what has happened, in my opinion, and this is not something that I've talked to anyone in, this is just my observation. So I'm not saying this is indeed the case, but it feels like as we've gone on, what's happened to Trey is his offensive slump has started to affect his play his play everywhere else, especially on the other end of the floor. And it shouldn't be that way. And you can see he was on the bench. And I think, that was one of the things that maybe Dusty saw, was he was looking at him on defense as well. It's like, hey, man, get on the bench. But I think they need to try to get him going offensively. And I don't know that that's always him being the guy who's handling the ball. It might be having him play off the ball and running some action for him to try to get him going. I don't know if that's in the game plan, but it might be something that you try in order to jumpstart him. I don't know. I think you try at this point.
That's a reasonable idea for sure, because I do think he's a good 3-point shooter, particularly when he takes quality looks. And, that feels plausible to me. It feels plausible to me to put Reuben Jones at the point, stick Namari and Trey at the wings looking for threes, and then have him play a toss game into the big guys. That's and Reuben at 6'5" feels like he may be more adept at that than a smaller guard. That's not a bad idea to me. So,
hey, look, you're trying to find things at this point.
Trying to find things, exactly. You're trying to figure out what
you got to figure out a way to get Trey going. I just don't see how. He's if you're gonna get your backcourt production, you got to get him rolling. I mean, unless you're expecting to get it consistently from your young guys, who I love, and I think have potential, but do I expect them to do it? I can't say I expect them to do it. It'd be great if they emerge, but I can't say that I'm going into the postseason expecting LJ Kayson or Justin Pippen to be, to emerge and all of a sudden be, Jace Richardson.
Yeah, well, no, Jace Richardson is a whole other league. I mean, I hope he's in the NBA next year, because he's one hell of a basketball player. So, and how many freshman guards actually blossom? I mean, if you look at Michigan, maybe you had Daniel Horton, Gary Grant. There aren't many, and so Pippen and Kayson, I think, have talent. They're just fighting their way through, but it's very unusual for a freshman guard to come into the Big Ten and be like Richardson has, or like Gary Grant was. Those are rare events.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Yeah, they likely will play Purdue, and that's that automatically puts more pressure on everyone.
On Trey.
It puts they've been riding Vlad, and I'm not saying Vlad can't do it. Vlad happens to he's not watching us, but it was on the slight chance that he happens to see this. I'm not saying Vlad can't do it, but what 2 games against Trey Kaufman would suggest is that Trey's that's gonna be a tough matchup for Vlad. So the onus is gonna be on the other guys to really step up their games if they happen to see Purdue, because it won't be the customary performance that we've seen from Vlad in every other game. That's the one matchup in league play, fellas, where Vlad wasn't all Big Ten Vlad. So what are you going to do, rest of the squad?
Yeah. Well, Kaufman-Renn is the real deal. I mean, he's proven that this year. So that's a tough matchup.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. Gonna be tough.
At least they've gotten to prepare, right? Like the nice thing about having Purdue in your, down that low of a seed is like they've got to prepare for another game, and Michigan's like, okay, let's just practice that Braden Smith stuff.
Yeah,
right?
and they've seen him twice, and they got killed the first time, and won the second time in a really competitive game. So yeah, they can beat Purdue. They have. So,
what are you guys' thoughts on LJ Kayson's increased minutes? What have been your impressions of him?
Well, I mean, Dusty talked about him in a press conference where it's like, he has some abilities to get to the basket, to get a piece of the paint that not everybody on our team has, and I wish that we'd been able to get him more involved early. But he's, a freshman who's still working on being consistent and efficient, and I understand why they're in the spot they are with him. But I also tend to agree with Dusty when I'm just like he does seem to have an ability to make his own shot that not everybody on the team has. And ideally, they would have been, up 10 points in some of these games instead of never up 10 points in any game. And they would have been able to, weather some ups and downs. But that's just not the way the season worked out.
Yeah, I think I haven't talked to anybody about this, but my impression is that Kason and to some extent Pippen have been playing because of Trey's difficulties on defense. And so I think it feels like Dusty has been somewhat frustrated with that and says, okay, I got to get somebody else, on the floor here because he's just not doing it on defense. And, and I like Kason a lot. I like Pippen. I think they both have upsides. It's just hard in the Big Ten to put a freshman guard in there and expect too much. There's just not that much history of success with freshman guards, particularly guards, with the ball. So
that might be. First of all, I think you said a mouthful there. I think you're right, and that's not me having any inside discussion.
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with him giving the nod. More to do with like, hey, it's one thing to not make shots.
Right.
It's another thing to have, different, off-brand guys going off, Holloman and Lukai Patterson and who are I mean, come on. We might as well put a young guy in there at this point, kind of deal. Now the problem is young guys make young guy mistakes on defense, so it's not like you're getting tangibly better on defense. Yeah, they might give you some things on offense that you like I don't think there's any question that LJ Kason, I think he's their best guy off the bounce right now. Just if you say one-on-one, who's their best guy at giving you a two-step getting to the rim, I would say LJ Kason. But that's not all basketball is, of course. So, what do you lose after?
I mean, as far as Case I'm concerned, I think his shot's going to come around. Like every single time he shoots it, like rims out for some reason. But he is a.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between Roddy Gale misses and LJ Kason misses.
True.
Correct.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. So that part's going to come around. That could be like a way that they get something that they haven't had yet. But you got to remember, Kason, Jace Richardson was like what number 35 or something like that recruit in the country. Kason wasn't even the number 35 combo guard in the country, right? He was unranked in the 24/7 composite. And you're going to take this guy and expect him to be a star who carries you as a point guard, right? Or as a semi point guard, right? That's a lot. So, I mean, what I see from him all the time is when he gets on defense, there are a lot of times where, like, Trey or even Gale or Jones are like struggling or having to give their all, every single thing that they got to try to anticipate where the guy that they're guarding is going to go because they just are in an athletic disadvantage. And then Kason gets on the guy and suddenly you can't get around him, right? They try to dribble him off the ball and you can't get around him. Physically, this guy is a find. He is a gem. And I think that one of the reasons he was ranked so low is that he was not prepared, right? And they can see that. And he makes freshman mistakes and he has a little unluck with his shots. But man, everything I've seen from Kason is saying Michigan has quite a find, and this guy's going to blow up next year.
What did you say, Craig? He made 13 threes in warmups.
I'm watching him in warm up, and and that's not the easiest context to shoot in. I mean, I know this because people are shooting balls in front of you and behind you and around you, and so keeping your concentration, trying to shoot threes is not necessarily all that easy. And I started counting. It might have been more than that. But when I first started, so I watched him. He made 13 straight threes and all this noise, and his motion looks good. It might have been more than that. So I believe, I'm with Seth on this. I'm a believer that there's a lot of upside with that kid. I also think that Pippen has some upside, and there's a ceiling there that's nice. Uh, so Fat Brooks, I don't know. I just haven't seen enough. I think Brooks is probably the best defender of those guys. It's my guess. But I don't know. It'll be interesting for me to see if next year. I mean, I doubt this will happen, but if May brings in a point guard in the offseason in the portal, I think the answer to that has to be no, given what he's got, assuming everyone stays. But Trey, to me, I like his game a lot, but he's really just not a point guard. The more I see of him, the more I think this guy's a two guard. He's a scorer. He's just really not, his mind or something just isn't into the consciousness of. He's not Chris Paul or Jason Kidd. That isn't his mind.
Well, Auburn had a great plan for him last year. He had his own 5 guys, right? They had like 2 sets of starters, and you'd be all prepared to deal with the starters, and then all of a sudden he comes out. He's taking pull-up threes. He's burrowing into the lane. He can expend all of his energy on defense, and then he comes off again. Right. And he plays 22 minutes a game or something. That was a great use of him because you got all of the point, you got all you could get out of him. And then you sit him on the bench before the rest of it sets in.
Yeah. I mean, I like Trey Donaldson a lot, I just think in the context of this team, it's a little awkward.
It's tough.
I'm sorry.
And I don't want to come off like I'm making excuses for him because I'm not.
Yeah.
But you haven't really invested in my opinion, in making him like a lead guard. That's not, and that's not what they have. That's not what they do. Like they don't play conventionally. They are, they get up and down. They have a lot of different guys kind of triggering the offense, and you got a point forward essentially that's handling the ball a lot. I mean, I was going nuts earlier in the season when you're waving, you got guys waving the point guard off because that's not what they do. They don't give it to the point guard and it's like, hey, he's running the show. Now, at times, you do want him to take over and take control, and Dusty's certainly wanted him to do more of that, and he hasn't made the most of the opportunities that he's had, and that warrants criticism. But it's not like they started out the season and it's like, hey, he's been the lead guard, and they've invested in him being the guy, being the spoon that stirs the coffee start to finish, and that's what they do, and he just hasn't been growing in that role all season long. That's just not how they play.
Yeah, I mean that's a very fair point. This is a wacky team. It's a wacky team. It's a sui generis team. It's one of a kind, and so it's hard to look at it and say, oh, because they don't. I don't recall a team like this. Not at Michigan. Not at any place else. And so I'm not sure what they quote should do to be better. And you may have a point, Sam, and that given the context of the team and what this team looks like, he can't grow into a role that isn't really there.
If it's not to your point, if that's not who he is as a player naturally.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it is. I think as a player, he's naturally he doesn't feel like a natural point guard to me, either in ability or temperament. I'm not sure what it is. But yeah, I mean, when at the beginning of the year, I keep coming back to this, Dusty said, oh yeah, this team is really going to be fun for fans. And that has really proven to be true. A, they're fun, and B, they're fun gothic, where you want to rip your hair out. And so so I don't.
I think Brian is right though.
Brian in the big picture.
To a break. We also need to pause for a second. We only a couple weeks removed from this team being at the top of the Big Ten. Flawed though they may have been,
Yeah.
they were at the top of the Big Ten. Wisconsin's only a couple of weeks removed from that. Purdue's only a couple of weeks removed from that. So, I mean, I say all of that to say things can change rather quickly if teams find a bit of a groove, if they rediscover some things. It could be a matchup, it could be a player getting hot. That might not be in Michigan's purview. It might be one of those other teams, but it certainly could be Trey getting on track or Danny doing this thing. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a matchup with Purdue. We'll see. But I think Brian's right. It's it's not like they went from being really good to being dog crap overnight.
Yeah. I just very quick thought. You wanted them to find something. Kason turns a corner, Pippen turns a corner, Trey develops like a dog game, or or something. And it just, by luck or whatever it is, they haven't had another thing. Everyone during the course of a basketball season gets that one more thing to get going. And we've been sitting here waiting for maybe Roddy Gale can turn into a shooter, like anything start happening. But it's just all going the other. It's going the other way. Even Kason, you've hit what you're going to get out of him, and that's kind of why everyone's looking at this team and going, okay, I think we've gotten what we gotten out of this team, because nothing has happened in a month and a half or 2 months where you can be like, oh, now they have this too.
Yeah, I think Brian's right about the Roddy Gale one. I think that's an off-season one. We need to get to a break though. When we come back on the other side, we'll switch gears, maybe look ahead to spring ball a little bit. I know Craig's been looking at Michigan baseball.
Yeah, and softball,
Michigan softball,
and hockey. Brian might want to talk about hockey a bit. We have a lot going on. Okay, forget hockey.
You're a terrible Canadian.
We got to do a break, though. Back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.
He's like Guy Lombardo. A name
clear on the radio.
So, question, fellas. Now, did any of you know that Michigan State had a senior tradition to kiss the floor?
I knew that.
I did.
I had no idea.
I had no idea. And I've watched Michigan State for years because my brother's a Michigan State fan, and he's always got the State game on. And I watch more State than like almost any Michigan fan because I'm just surrounded by State people. And I had no idea.
Bad.
I had zero idea.
So then I asked my brother and his friends, did you guys know they had this tradition? And they're like, no.
So we're supposed to know what they do?
State guys don't know about this either. No, because
I knew about it because I've seen them do it.
Never heard of.
But I have to admit, Trey Holloman, something wrong with that guy. Man. I mean, did you see? I don't know if I watched the Michigan State, and can I swear on this segment?
For the moment, yes, you can swear.
Okay, I watched the Michigan State Iowa game, and which was a close game. And at one point, Holloman gets in the face of an Iowa player who's not saying anything or doing anything, and inch to inch yells at him, "Fuck you, bitch," at the top of his voice. And the camera came back and replayed it about 4 times because it was so out of bounds and so crazy. And so that's a crazy kid. That kid has there's something wrong there.
If I was a Michigan State fan, though, I love it. If I'm a Michigan State fan, I love that guy. And he's going insane.
And I like that team.
I gotta go protect my logo.
Protect your what? Your logo?
Listen, here's my thing. Yeah. Here's my thing, and the NCAA needs to get on this as soon as possible. The winning team controls the logo. If there's a midfield thing, it belongs to the winning team. Ohio State, if you just lost to Michigan for the 4th time in a row and they're going to plant a flag in the middle of your guess what? That's Michigan territory. You had a chance to defend it. You lost. Winners get mid-court.
Yeah. No. Here's the craziest thing about it to me. There's 40 seconds to go in the game. Players are allowed to be on the court.
Well, that game was over.
On the court the whole
I don't care.
damn
That game was over. Michigan had lost. Get off the midcourt because you have lost. You have ceded the midfield to the winners of the game. All right. When Michigan is winning, if Michigan's winning that game by 20 points next year when we're playing at Breslin at the end of the season and they want to go kiss the floor, they get to kiss our feet because we won. That's the only thing I care about. Mid-court belongs to the winners.
Yeah, I don't think
I mean,
I don't think that makes you crazy, Craig. I've heard worse.
I mean, they can lick my butthole. That's all I have to say.
Oh man.
I mean, giving them credit, that's a good team. Michigan State is a good team, and Jace Richardson is one hell of a player. And so I got nothing to say there, and they were the best team in the Big Ten.
Well, listen, they
Izzo is a douche, but that's another matter.
Yeah, they are a tremendous defensive team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tremendous defensive team.
Back in about 30 seconds.
That can lock the hell out of you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a graphic I was watching their game against Iowa. Not that it mattered at the end of the day with the way Michigan played when they went up there. But, there was a point in the game and they were talking about how Michigan State had locked up, the last 6 teams they played. And each of them, including Michigan, had gone through a drought of 4+ minutes without scoring, 4 to 8 minutes without scoring late in the game. It's they lock you down toward the end of the game. And
stand by, guys. We're coming back momentarily. Hold on.
Yeah, Aikens especially one of the best defenders. Maybe defensive player of the year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and he's
back to clean language and back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA online at the Big 1050.com. Folks, Truck Month is here at Brighton Ford. Head right in there and settle into the seat of your favorite truck. Get in, take control, and drive off the lot the truck that was meant for you. Take advantage of huge savings through March 31st. Well-qualified lessees can lease a 2024 Ford F-150 for as low as $216 a month. Only $3,500 down plus first payment, taxes, doc fee, title, license, and state fees due at signing. Security deposit waive, 7,500 miles per year, 24-month lease. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD to see dealer for full details. Brighton Ford is there for you. Just call 1-800-NEW-FORD. Tell them I sent you, just like I sent all my friends over the University of Michigan Athletic Department, and you too will be able to get on board with Brighton Ford. Now, fellas, is it just me, or can you see on the horizon a Michigan women's basketball team making a trip back to the Elite Eight? If you can play with SC at the beginning of the season, and then the other SC, I bet you the Trojans don't like that, but the other SC at the end of the season, you can play with anyone. And this team played both SCs to the hilt.
Well, I watched a bit of women's basketball this year, and I went to a few games, and the women's game has improved remarkably. It's not the same women's game of 20 years ago, that's for sure, and it's not even the same women's game of 5 or 6 years ago. It's much more athletic. It's much more competent. And I used to have a hard time watching women's basketball. I'll admit it, even though I did watch it some. I don't know if anybody saw the Michigan-Maryland game. Maryland has a really nice team, and Michigan won that game by 27 points. And it was really beautiful. I mean, beautiful basketball on any level, what Michigan played in that game. And they came out against USC, and that game and USC is good. I don't know if they're number 1 or number 2 in the country. The best 2 teams are probably UCLA and USC. UCLA has a 6'7" center who has some skills, and USC is just big and tough and strong, and they probably have the best player in the country in Juju Watkins. So those are two really good teams, and Michigan came out and with 6 minutes to go, that game's tied. And Michigan has toughness. Aside from skills, they have toughness, and it focuses on their freshman class. Silas Swartz is tough and really incredibly quick going to her left. She's only about 5'10" is my guess, but she'll put her nose in there and rebound. She's a really nice player. Olivia Olson, I think, was the co-freshman of the year in the Big Ten, and she's a really nice player, has a legitimate jump shot, which still isn't all that usual in the women's game. So they still turn it over too much, but they're going to see more turnovers in the women's game. That's just, I think, a part of it. But very impressed with what Barnes-Arico has done generally. Very impressed with this particular team. If she can keep them all together, she's got something. I looked at her recruiting class, and it's a good class. It's top 100 kids, but they're still basically guards or small, and right now they're playing 5 guards. They're playing a guard at center, and what's her name? Hobbs, who's a nice player, but she's a senior. She'll be gone, but they're playing her. She's 6'3", but she's the center, but she's really not a center. She's really a guard. And that looks like that's the way she's going to go, with quickness. And interestingly, this may be of interest to some people, is that one of their freshmen coming in, she's 6'1", also sort of a guard, is Justin Fields' sister. Is coming in to play at Michigan next year as a basketball player. So, and she's fairly highly ranked. And so it's, what Barnes-Arico is doing is interesting. They do have one big kid, Russian, Yulia Grabovskaya, who
Impressive.
Pardon me?
That's impressive.
Yeah, and her game has improved a lot over the year. She tends to get into foul trouble. So it's hard to keep her out there, but, she does have some ability. She'll be back. I expect Michigan, over the next year or two, to be one of the better teams in the country. So, yeah, can they make the Final 8 this year? Yes, they can.
Yeah, I think so, too. She has superstar freshmen. She's after the season, they'll have to hit the portal for some size. If they can do that, they can be even more than that. So we'll see. Brian, question.
What?
Michigan hockey make the tournament?
I don't know. It's not up to them anymore. Like they're they're on the bubble in such a way as that, they're done. And so they're just hoping that there's no bid stealers in the smaller conferences. And if there aren't, then they'll get it. And if there are, then they won't.
And so, I have a question for you on this. It comes down to this, by my understanding. Notre Dame can't win the Big Ten. That really hurts Michigan, because that becomes a bid steal, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they need either BC, Maine, BU, UConn, Providence, or UMass to win that conference.
Yeah, Hockey East shouldn't be a problem.
That one.
There's 6 teams that are going to make the tournament. Any one of them can win. Yeah.
And they need Quinnipiac to win the ECAC. Is that right?
Yes.
Or lose quickly.
Right. And they need Western or Denver to win whatever conference that is these days. And so, how many of those 4 events do they need to happen? 3 or 4? All of them. And that's why I said,
because right now they're 14th, and there's going to be 2 auto beds from the CCHA and Atlantic Hockey below them.
Oh, okay.
So
they need all 4 of those things to happen.
They're really on the cusp, yeah. So you figure that the Big Ten and Hockey East are probably safe. And what happens in the CCHA and Atlantic Hockey doesn't really matter, because none of those teams are going to make the tournament anyway. So you're really looking at Quinnipiac losing immediately or winning their conference, and then no bid stealer in the NCHC.
Okay.
So it's about a 50-50 shot.
Okay. Yeah. I read someone had calculated it at 46 or something like that, or 45.
Yeah, College Hockey News has it at 42%, but I'm gonna round. That's what I do.
Yeah, weird. It's just weird things happen. You can't have two teams. You need one team from the ECAC. You need only two teams from the NCHC. You need only 7 teams from Hockey East. Any one of those conferences that is just so many different things that can happen randomly in hockey that you can really get hosed.
Yeah. So I have one other question for Brian about hockey, in that in baseball there's something called expected batting average, which I think is a pretty good stat because it tends to define the randomness that accrues with any individual player. What about expected goals in hockey? Because I saw this weekend on Friday, the expected goals for Penn State was 4, they got 6, and on Saturday it was 3.7, they got 5. I mean, what do you make of that?
So I don't know what those models look like.
Okay.
I don't know how much fidelity they have, especially in college hockey, because I just don't know how they're being calculated. I don't want to denigrate anybody who might be putting these together, but it's unclear to me how accurate that is.
Yeah, scoring chances are not equal in hockey.
Right.
And so it's hard.
And that's what XG tries to calculate, but like College Hockey News has it. I just saw that they had it a few days ago, and I haven't really looked at it enough to figure out whether my intuitive sense of what's going on in a college hockey game matches up with their numbers.
Yeah.
So
the other thing I want to ask you guys, because we're in our last second here, is at the end of the game on Saturday, Naurato said, and I think this is just about an exact quote, "Never, ever, 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 ever will Michigan be in this situation again so long as I'm the head coach." And I took that as meaning, I could be wrong, I took that as meaning I ain't going to get rope-a-dope by my players again. Whereas last year, when they had five kids who had made it pretty clear they were coming back, and none of them did. I mean, do you think that's what he was talking about? That maybe he's going to set, harder and faster deadlines for his NHL kids going forward?
I don't know. I mean, I think he's just looking at this talent level, which is not to the usual level, and saying, well, like, my job as the University of Michigan head coach is to recruit some sweet ass dudes who are good at the hockey. And there's not enough of them this year. Like, you got some guys who are players, but the talent level, like, there's nobody on this team who makes my heart sing and makes me understand why hockey is a thing. There's no Hughes, there's no Camilleri, there's no TJ Hensick. Like, Hage is the closest thing, but he hit a freshman wall a long time ago, and just kind of hasn't been quite on the same level he was earlier in the year, which is something you expect from a true freshman playing his first college hockey season. So to me, like, this is going to be one of the most fascinating off seasons in Michigan hockey history, because the opening of the CHL is going to.
That's what he means. He means he's going to raid Canada.
I mean, people are talking about various CHL players who are very highly regarded, and it's not just the 2 guys who could be the first overall pick in consecutive draft years, but there's guys who CHL teams are just preparing to lose to college, and most people think that they're going to Michigan. So this might be a situation where Naurato looks a little uncomfortably ruthless, because the standard of play this year, I just think, wasn't up to snuff, and he knows that, and he needs to get back to what Michigan has been historically.
Well, Michigan State cut a bunch of kids last
year.
Well,
we're Canadians now. They'll be okay with it. These guys
are all Canadians now. And we're becoming the.
See you tonight. See you tonight at Mark Ridley's.
Yeah, you gotta go. We'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for watching and listening to another edition of the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA online at